we're talking about the sewage facilities planning process, and I was attempting to walk through that process. So let me just back up and sort of ramp back up again. The sewage facilities permitting process is a two-step process. The first of those steps is sewage facilities planning modules, essentially amendments for land development to the Township's Act 537 official plan. That has been submitted. That was submitted as part of the preliminary land development application. The second part of the sewage permitting process is, not surprisingly, called a Part 2 permit or a water quality management permit. That is the permit that would be necessary to construct the wastewater treatment facility and all of the mains and infrastructure associated with it. That permit does not even get applied for until the sewage facilities planning module process is complete. And I'm trying to remember if there's ever been a situation, and there's not one that I can think of, where that ever happened prior to preliminary land development approval. Certainly not one that jumps to my mind. So the process is submit your sewage facilities planning module with your preliminary land development application. That gets reviewed and approved by the municipality, and then forwarded, this sewage facilities planning module, then gets forwarded to the department, to DEP, for DEP review and approval. That process should be underway right now. So we should not be standing here 3 months in without any comments from the township about the sewage facilities planning module. That just should not be the case. But as far as we're learning, there has been no review of the applicant's sewage facilities planning module. Now, the question that was asked before we broke was, what happens if this wastewater treatment plant can't be permitted by DEP? And that answer essentially is threefold. Let me get back, I'm going to ramp back up to the sand word. Okay. Firstly, this is the preferred option as depicted on the plans. There is stream edge on the applicant's property, so we would not need to cross any property lines to do discharge of treated effluent to a receiving water course. That has to be permitted. There's no question that that requires DEP permitting. If that can't happen, then the next option to be explored would be some connection to public. New Hanover. Our understanding is that New Hanover has plenty of capacity and would love to sell that capacity. Maybe that's accurate, maybe that's inaccurate. That doesn't matter right now because that's not what the application is for. If New Hanover is not an option, and if this can't be permitted, then the next option is, okay, well, how many lots could we build that would have on-lot sand mounds? Essentially an on-lot individual treatment and disposal for that home. We're all familiar with individual on-lot systems. That would, I don't know the extent to which it would, but I'm imagining that would significantly impair the density at the development. If none of those options are possible, there's just no way to treat sanitary sewer at the property. Tim, can't. Especially with the recording. If none of those options are possible, there's just no way to treat sanitary sewer at this property, then you can't develop it. You can't develop real estate in Pennsylvania without figuring out what's going to happen when you flush the toilet. So this is the option that is being pursued with this plan. We have done everything that we can do at this point in time and that we should have done by this point in time to begin the permitting process for this. That first step to bring us all the way back around is sewage facilities planning module submission. That's been done. The fact that the township hasn't reviewed that yet is not something that the applicant is responsible for.
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
Well, there's comments within our review letters that would pertain directly to that sewage component.
Okay.
Some of the things that are in there, that there's 75 EDUs that are being allocated to the township. Nobody's aware of that, what they're for.
Can I address that?
The other comment,
Okay.
the other comment that I have is that the ownership of the facility is up in question. Everything within that component 3 is stating that the township's gonna take ownership.
Okay, fair enough. And that then requires that we have your review letter. I do have questions about the EDU calculations, and I have questions about why a tapping fee would need to be paid for a purely private system. I don't know why the applicant would need to pay a tapping fee for something that's not township-owned or authority-owned.
Again, that's a discussion item. If that's not, the township is saying that they don't wanna take dedication of it. If they're forced by DEP to take dedication of it at some point.
Then at that point in time, that becomes an issue. But again, as we stand here right now, we are just beginning the permitting and review process. We have the review letters dated January 14th. It's February 5th. Again, this is an iterative process. This normally plays out over the course. Again, gentlemen, please correct me if you think I'm wrong, but this normally plays out over the course of several submissions. You submit, you get review comments. You respond to those comments, you resubmit. Another review letter comes out, back and forth, until ultimately the consultants say, okay, we're satisfied that all of our comments have been addressed. We recommend that the township take action. During that entire period of time, the applicant offers extensions of time to the municipality for the review. I've been doing this for almost 25 years. I don't know that, save one example that pops into my mind, there's ever been a land development application in my career that didn't go through this iterative process. These ordinances are extremely complicated and complex. It's impossible to submit a purely code-compliant submission on the first go-around. You're always going to get comments, or not even ordinance-based comments, suggestions. Norm may have suggestions for Susan as, hey, I know that you designed this way, but I think this might be a better way to design it. Okay, let's talk about that. That's how this process plays out, not denial. That never happens.
Excuse my, can I just say something? I just want to, excuse my naivete in your 20 years of experience, but you had made the comment about the iterations that you could actually go through, have your plans, you find out the water and the sewer, maybe can't handle the volume, you can't put it where you thought you could, you get down to it, and eventually you might even end up down to single dwelling units with sand mounds. Why would you not determine the water and sewer capacity initially, instead of spending all the money and time on plans and our time and spending time with engineers to go through this iteration? It seems to me if you just found out and filed the permits with the appropriate authorities to determine how much water could be used and the wastewater treatment, and just figure that out in the beginning, and then build propose plans that doesn't create all this back and forth spending of money. It seems like a big waste of money.
Because that is not how the development process works. It just isn't. The development process works in the way that I described.
Oh, no, actually, you don't have to repeat it again. I totally understand it. You
First
said it
step
several
is,
times.
the civil
You said it
engineer
several
looks at
times.
the municipal ordinances and says, this is what we propose. We obviously have reason to conclude, I'm a land use lawyer, not an engineer, but Mr. Ebert, Susan, our geologists obviously have reasons to believe that this works. If it turns out that it doesn't work, that it can't be permitted, that there's some issue with the soils or the stream quality or whatever, then that forces us to rethink, to revise, and resubmit.
Mind-boggling waste of resources. Human
But
resources.
an equivalent waste of resources if we were, first of all, DEP wouldn't even entertain the application, I don't think. But if we could get DEP to fully permit this before we ever came in here with land development plans, again, not the state of the law, and again, I don't think DEP would even entertain the application, that would be fantastically expensive. Only to find out that the development doesn't meet zoning.
I guess another question I have is, why didn't we hear from you prior to now with a sketch plan to work through all this?
Again, I am new to the party, but my understanding is that there were significant discussions, a lot of back and forth over the years between Tim and prior administrations about what could happen at this property. In fact, as we said to the Planning Commission last week, right before they recommended denial, it was that one of the alternatives that Tim has talked about, and Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, was doing a 55 and over community, which we think makes a lot of sense for municipalities. And that just doesn't have legs. It didn't have legs. I don't know, the township wasn't interested in it, but
The township wasn't interested in 55 and
again,
older?
Yeah,
Was it 55 and older on the north side or north and south? Both
Can I
sides?
just give a little bit of information, not
Yeah, okay.
argumentatively, just stating a fact?
Absolutely.
First, if I go back on the planning module, just to clarify, the question was where did the information come from?
Yeah.
We show 75 EDUs. We show the Frederick home being tied in.
Okay.
DEP told us that the Frederick home had to go in, and they showed us the permit. That's how we knew that that had to go away. The township gave us the 75 EDU number. We worked with the previous township manager, and she spoke to the board, and this was an idea for failing systems, whatever else. I can't answer that question, but it came from, now in the review, you can go back and say, I don't want a single extra planning, a sewer EDU. But then we just need to hear that from your consultant, and we design accordingly. Then to your point on designing the sewer plant, well, why would we design it for those 75 if they don't go in? So yeah, you get into this chicken and egg thing, it's really tough. And the problem we have is the DEP's a state agency. So they look at you as, you get to work out of the township before you come to us. Same thing with the state, you get to work out of the state before you go to the federal government. That's the way it works, unfortunately. Now, back to your point specifically, again, just supplying information. We felt like we spent a couple of years in good faith, and it's not your fault because none of you were there. I'm just saying, Norm has reviewed a number of sketches that we put together in front of the township. We have review letters, they're in your file. I'm not going to look at your file, but they're there. I mean, you say, well, there's review letters. They're in the file. We were working. And I finally, in frustration, at the last meeting that we were at, I said, if we can't do something that we all like, we'll just do our best to meet everything in your ordinance and do it by right. And they said, go ahead. That's why we're here right here.
With
We
this
use,
development here.
that's correct. We use the 75 EDUs they came from. I mean, we're not trying to jam anything down anybody's throat. We spent 3 years trying to find out what could get approved. And we're finally just told, build what the ordinance says, you don't have to come talk to us. Engineer plan, do it. And that's what we did. So that's not where we started. Then when it comes to sewer, just to clear up, I'm not giving different information, but the last board said absolutely no way in hell do we want public sewer coming from New Hanover. I called the sewer authority manager and said, would you have interest in talking about selling sewer?
Sure.
I came in here and they said absolutely not. So that went nowhere. You know, you raise questions, I try to go out and get answers.
So New Hanover was okay, but this board wasn't?
Well, we didn't go through the entire process. I'm not putting words in their mouth, but we were told don't continue. The sewer authority manager thought they'd want to sell because they had a lot of extra capacity and they could use the money. But that was nixed. Now to his point, when I started talking, to 55 and over. We proposed a 55 and over. This plan started out over 300 units. At one point, there was this discussion that 292 units is what could be approved. So we came in at 292 units, and then we were told that's too many units. We're now somewhere in the 270s. I mean, we've not been trying to get more. We've cut back, we've done what we thought, but we had proposed under 300, 55 and over. And if you're familiar, kind of like maybe you've heard Del Webb, they advertise on TV. A lot of builders build them where they have the big clubhouse and you have to be 55 and over by federal law, you can't live in there and go to school. So you all of a sudden get higher taxes because the houses tend to be worth as much money or more than what we would have with multifamily. You have people with higher incomes because they have their assets for retirement. So the township gets more taxes. You get nobody in school, you get less traffic, you get not many people are driving during rush hour. We itemized all these benefits to the township.
Sure.
We were told no. We talked about putting all the homes on the south side and leaving the north open. Let that be a farm field. We said we could bring public water down 73 so you don't have any wells with the issues with neighbors with wells. And we were told no at every turn. if there would be interest in sort of any of these things, that we could actually make traction and do something, would love to do that.
Yeah.
But we have not had an open door to talk to me. I apologize, I didn't come in and talk to you as a new board prior to this, but all I can do is work off the direction I'm given. And so, the last we were in was just before you guys came in, and we were told, do it by right, sewer on there. They wanted to own the sewer plant. The previous board wanted to own the sewer plant. So maybe that's where the EDU price came from, I don't know. They wanted to own the water plant. It sounds like the planning commission was like, no, we want nothing to do with either one. Again, those are things we have to work through. I think that was the whole point. That's why this doesn't get done in one night. We're not here asking for approval tonight. There's a million things that we need the answers on. But we gotta find out somehow to get the answers, or we'll never get you the plans you like.
And just to round out that point, what we're asking you tonight is far from shoving something down your throats. All we're asking you to do tonight is don't deny the plan, don't violate this duty of good faith. Enter into this iterative process with the applicant. The way that it happens all over the place, all the time, many, this is just how it happens. So if that's the inclination of the board, then we will take the review comments, go back, revise, resubmit, and we'll continue to work through this process. If the board's inclination is to reject the extension and deny, I mean, I'm not puffing up my chest, but that really only leaves Tim with one option at that point in time. And I try to be as forthright as possible about what I believe the state of the law is. And I firmly believe that denial of this extension under this fact pattern and summary denial of this application would constitute bad faith. I firmly believe that.
Okay. Go ahead, Norm.
One thing, Norm Waller, Township Engineer. The one thing I wanted to talk about, and it's really more of a sewer issue, and I don't want to step on John's toes, but because he's just been involved with the township from a history standpoint since January, I'm kind of turning the tape back here. I believe there was discussion that obviously when you start to look at the number of homes that are being generated, and then consequently the number of EDUs that are going to be generated as because of that, each stream that would receive effluent from a sewer plant, I believe we typically refer to that as a receiving stream.
Sure.
Okay, well, you could certainly imagine that Scioto Creek or Swamp Creek would not be able to handle as much flow as the Susquehanna or the Schuylkill River,
Sure.
that kind of thing, just simply because of the volume. I believe there was discussion that while the Frederick Mennonite discharge location is where it is, where, I'm sorry, what Mike had pointed out, I believe that there was discussion that because of the additional EDUs and the discharge from a new plant that would not only serve the proposed development, but in addition to that, the replacement of the Frederick Living would probably have to go down Colonial Road and discharge to the Swamp Creek, because whatever type of cross-section of flow is in that tributary, obviously you get farther down to the swamp and the flow is much more significant. I don't hold me to that, but I believe there was discussion.
I remember that.
Okay, I believe there was discussion to
Yes.
that effect.
Yes.
So
I don't disagree with any of that. I would say, when we dealt with DEP, we explored the north side for sewer treatment. We looked at everything. I mean, so it wasn't like we just, my side, came in and said, we'll just plunk it in there and dump it where the other sewer plant's at. There was discussion with DEP. Everything Norm said is correct. Yeah, how much flow does it come out? Can it handle it and whatever else? So we got that feedback, and at that stage, DEP is exchanging conversation, or having conversations. There are no permit numbers, so where we started the conversation. So unless you talk to the specific person, and some of those things, and some of the stuff Susan does, it's a different person every day that answers certain questions. So it's, but you go your way to get answers. In this case, Fred Ebert had certain connection to what he knew, and asked those questions. We could dig up who that was and what that was, but at that point, it's to help us get to where we are today.
and the time what Tim had brought up about the idea of a separate system on the north side and south side, I believe the township was against that. What they didn't want to, and I'm not even quite so sure what was on the north side to receive that flow. Maybe it could receive that flow or not, but I believe the township was against it and wanted to, was in favor of replacing the Frederick Living plant with something larger, and consequently did not want to have sewer plants all over the place. So they said, we'd rather see it at one location, make the plant larger, so it could receive the north side, in fact, if something was going to happen up there, the south side, replace Frederick Living and not have multiple sewer plants. I believe that was the feeling of the township at the time that was discussed.
Because that other one was in poor shape.
The Frederick Living plant was, I can't speak to what kind of
Right,
shape
but that's
it
the
was in,
premise here.
but
I got it.
it wouldn't surprise me if he was of the opinion
Yeah.
to, if you're gonna do that, the plant's gotta be at least 20, 25 years
Sure.
old. You know, it would make sense to replace that with one centralized location, you know, something newer technology, more efficient, expandable, all of the above.
Okay.
How is that fair to Frederick Living?
I'm sorry?
How is that fair to Frederick Living? I mean, who's gonna, now they're gonna be billed for sewer and everything by somebody
When they would
else?
have gotten their sewer permit, that was a condition of the permit, put in the permit from day one, so they knew before they ever built.
Is that in the sewer module too, that permit? that-
They would have went through a sewer planning.
No, I'm
module.
talking about in the sewer submission, because I did go through it, I just didn't see it.
I haven't read the sewage,
Mike?
the planning
No,
module.
John.
They
That's an outside.
they do account for Frederick Living, and they abandoned it in the existing wastewater treatment.
And that
DEP.
That's what they're,
That came
that's what
from
they're
me.
providing to DEP.
That's
coming
what
from
they're
my
saying to
office.
DEP.
That's correct.
But DEP didn't say,
I haven't had any correspondence with anybody.
Okay.
Can I just clarify one thing? Can Susan maybe explain specifically how the planning module goes? Because it goes to you before it goes to DEP. So until you approve it, DEP won't even look at it. Do you mind sharing?
Sure. So,
If there's one standard, we don't have any choice.
right, so the planning module gets prepared, and then it goes to the township, and the township needs to review, the sewer authority engineer would have to review it and look at it, and there's things in there that they would comment on, ask us to correct, or whatever, if they don't agree with something that's in there. That planning module, once the township is okay with the substance of that planning module, then it needs to go out to 3 different agencies to review. They're called component 4s. The component 4 would go to the county health department, it would come to the township planning agency, and it would go to the Montgomery County Planning Agency. So each of those entities would then review the planning module under this component 4. There's a 4A, B, and C for each agency. So there's a form that goes along with the planning module, and then each of those agencies will fill out that form and send it back to whoever is preparing that planning module. And then once you have all that information back, then it comes in front of the township. The township needs to enact a resolution accepting the change to the 537 plan or accepting this planning module. Then once that is done, then the township will take all of that data and submit it to DEP.
And then
it's
DEP will review
process.
it, and there'll be more revisions, and back and forth until it's permitted. So it's customary for us to talk to DEP before we submit it October 31st, to get enough information so that we can hopefully provide something that